It was an ordinary morning, the kind that begins with the world half awake, the sky painted in pale shades of blue and gray, and the quiet hum of life stirring on the streets. Thomas, a single father in his late 30s, hurried along the sidewalk with his work bag slung over one shoulder and his eyes carrying the weariness of too many sleepless nights. His days were filled with juggling 2 jobs, raising his 8-year-old son, and trying to hold his fragile little world together after the woman he once loved had walked away years ago. Life had been harsh, demanding, and unforgiving, but Thomas carried on with the quiet strength only a single parent could truly understand. That on that chilly morning, as he neared the bus stop on the corner of Pine Street, something caught his attention. A small figure sat hunched on the bench, motionless except for a weak, trembling sway. At first, he thought it was just another child waiting for the school bus. But then, in a sudden, heartbreaking moment, the girl's tiny body slumped sideways and collapsed onto the cold pavement. That Thomas's heart stopped. Without thinking, he dropped his bag and rushed forward. His breath caught in his throat as he bent over the little girl, no older than 7, her skin pale, her lips trembling as though she had no strength left in her. Her backpack lay beside her, worn and frayed, its zipper half open, spilling out a notebook with a shaky drawing of a house. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and stories that can change hearts, please take a moment right now to like, comment, share, and subscribe to this channel. It helps us bring more powerful, real stories like this to life for you. Thomas gently lifted the frail child into his arms. She was light, far too light for her age, as though hunger had carved its way into her bones. Her eyes flickered open for a second, glassy with exhaustion, before closing again. Thomas's chest tightened. He didn't know this girl, but something deep inside him screamed that she was in trouble. Serious trouble. He carried her to a nearby bench, trying to wake her. Her breath was shallow, and her small hands felt cold against his own. He pulled off his jacket and wrapped her in it, his mind racing. Should he call an ambulance? Should he try to find her parents? The panic in his chest was unlike anything he had felt since the night he had nearly lost his own son to a severe fever years ago. That same helplessness returned now, gnawing at him with sharp teeth. When the ambulance finally arrived, Thomas climbed in beside her, refusing to let her face the ride alone. At the hospital, doctors rushed her away, and he was left in the waiting room, pacing, his heart beating with the anxious rhythm of a father who could not ignore the suffering of a child, even if she wasn't his own. Hours later, a doctor emerged with a grave expression. The girl was stable now, but malnourished, dehydrated, and carrying signs of long-term neglect. Thomas sat down heavily, his head spinning. Neglect. The word cut deep. Where were her parents? Why had she been alone at a bus stop in such a fragile state? He thought of his son, Daniel, who at that very moment was at school, probably laughing with friends, safe and cared for. And then he thought of this girl, abandoned, frail, and utterly alone. Something broke inside him. When she finally woke, Thomas was allowed to see her. She lay on the hospital bed, her eyes wide with both fear and hope, her tiny fingers clutching the blanket as though afraid it would be taken from her. She whispered her name in a voice so faint it almost disappeared in the room. Lily. Her story, when the social workers pieced it together, was devastating. Lily's mother had passed away 2 years ago, and her father, broken by grief and burdened by addiction, had slipped into a dark spiral. She had been left to fend for herself more often than not, scrounging for food, missing school, waiting at bus stops not because she expected a bus, but because it gave her somewhere to sit, somewhere to not be invisible. The neighbors had seen her, but never stepped in. To them, she was just another forgotten child of a broken home. Thomas sat in silence as he listened. Every word felt like a weight pressing harder on his chest. He knew pain, he knew abandonment, but to hear it through the eyes of a child was unbearable. Lily's story wasn't just hers. It echoed something inside him, the fear of what his own son might have become if he hadn't fought so hard to hold their little world together. In the weeks that followed, Thomas couldn't shake the memory of that morning. He visited Lily often at the hospital, bringing little snacks, coloring books, and stories to make her smile. Slowly, her eyes began to brighten, her laughter cautious but real, her trust slowly building with each visit. Daniel, curious at first, began to tag along, And soon Lily was no longer a fragile stranger, but a little sister in spirit. The hospital staff noticed. The social workers noticed. Even Thomas noticed, though he tried to bury it at first. He was falling into the role of protector, caregiver, father figure. He told himself it was temporary, that once Lily's father got help, or once a foster home was arranged, things would return to normal. But each time Lily reached for his hand with quiet trust, each time Daniel shared his toys with her and called her sis, the line between temporary and permanent blurred. One evening, as he watched the two children laugh together over a silly board game in the hospital room, Thomas felt tears sting his eyes. He had lived so long with the ache of incompleteness, with the shadow of loss from his own broken marriage, that he had forgotten what it felt like for his home to be filled with this kind of warmth. And now, here it was, brought back by a little girl who had collapsed at a bus stop, a little girl who just needed someone to care. But life wasn't so simple. The court system and child services weighed heavily on Lily's future. Her father appeared once during the process, disheveled and trembling, promising to change. But even he seemed to know the fight had already slipped from his hands. He loved his daughter, but his love was buried under the weight of his demons. In a painful, tearful moment, he signed the papers that released her into the care of the state, a decision that both freed her and shattered what was left of him. It was then that Thomas stepped forward. He didn't do it out of impulse, but out of something deeper, a calling, perhaps, or the undeniable pull of a heart that couldn't stand by. He applied to foster Lily. The process was long, filled with interviews, background checks, and endless paperwork. But through it all, he never wavered. He had once thought his life was already overflowing with responsibility, already stretched thin. But sometimes, the heart expands in ways logic cannot explain. When the day finally came, when Lily walked into his small home with her worn backpack and cautious eyes, Thomas knelt down to her level and whispered, "You're safe now. You're home." Daniel hugged her fiercely, as if he had been waiting for that moment all along. For the first time in years, Thomas felt something shift deep within him. His home wasn't broken anymore. It was healing. The journey wasn't easy. There were nights when Lily woke screaming from nightmares, mornings when she refused to eat because the fear of not having enough was still carved into her bones, days when the scars of her past bled into her present. But through every tear, every setback, Thomas and Daniel stood beside her. Slowly, the shadows receded. Lily began to paint again, filling her notebooks with bright houses, smiling families, and sunny skies. She began to laugh louder, run faster, dream bigger. And through it all, Thomas discovered something he hadn't expected. Saving Lily didn't just change her life, it healed his own wounds, too. He had thought he was giving her a second chance, but in truth, she had given him one as well. The chance to love more, to live more, to build a family stronger than the one he had lost. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us continue to bring emotional, life-changing stories to you. Stories that remind us of the power of kindness and second chances. And before you go, we'd love to hear from you. What does family mean to you? Comment below with your thoughts. We read every single one. Thomas often found himself back at that bus stop, not because he needed to wait for a bus, but because it reminded him of where everything had changed. He would stand there, watching the morning light stretch across the pavement, remembering the day he found Lily. He realized now that sometimes life brings you to the edge of heartbreak not to destroy you, but to show you how much love you still have left to give. And as he walked back home to where Daniel and Lily were waiting, laughter spilling through the windows, Thomas knew one thing for certain. That little girl collapsing at the bus stop hadn't just broken his heart, she had rebuilt it.